No one is your friend. They clapped when you rose until your rise outshined theirs. They shook your hand while their other hand tightened around the knife. They called you brother when you were useful, stranger once you weren't. Most people call it paranoia, but Machiavelli called it wisdom, because in the real game of power, the unfiltered version behind closed doors, loyalty is not sacred. It's currency. It's leverage. It's a contract written in invisible ink, set to expire the moment your usefulness fades. You felt this, haven't you? The friend who vanished after you said no once. The co-worker who smiled until your promotion came. The lover who adored you until you stopped chasing. It wasn't a betrayal of the heart. It was a betrayal of the deal. And the truth is, that deal was always there. You just didn't see it. You were taught to believe in loyalty like it's a fairy tale. That friendship is unconditional. That kindness is sacred. That good people stay. But Machiavelli saw through the mask. He saw what most are too afraid to admit. No one is your friend. Not in the way you hope. Not in the way you need. Because every I've got your back, every ride or die, every smile you mistook as love was actually leverage, emotional, financial, social, strategic. This video is not about cynicism. It's about awakening. It's about recognizing that the moment you expect loyalty without leverage, you become the easiest target in the room. So what's the move? You stop begging for permanence. You stop bleeding for those who wouldn't hand you a bandage. You stop assuming and you start calculating. Because in this game, you don't win by being liked. You win by being necessary. And by the end of this video, you'll see exactly how to become untouchable. The illusion of loyalty. They don't leave when you change. They leave when you stop serving the role they silently cast you in. Friend, partner, supporter, ladder. The truth no one tells you is that most loyalty is conditional. It's not forged in fire. It's carved out of convenience. We're taught to treat loyalty like it's sacred, like it's carved in stone. But in Machiavelli's world, the real world, it was never sacred. It was rented, never owned. The rent? Usefulness, compliance, silence. And when that rent stops getting paid, the smile fades, the applause dies. The "I've always got your back" turns into ghosting without a single warning shot. Loyalty is not love. It's leverage with good marketing. Look around you. Think about the people who claim to love you most. Where are they now? The second you raise your voice. The second you got a little too successful. The second you started loving yourself more than you loved making them comfortable, they left. And maybe they didn't say it out loud. Maybe they didn't slam the door, but they stopped calling, stopped checking in. They disappeared in silence so casual. It made you question your own worth. But this wasn't an accident. This wasn't a glitch in the system. This is the system. People don't stay because they love you. They stay because they need you. And the moment that need disappears, so do they? This is the illusion, one of the most dangerous illusions you'll ever swallow. That just because someone smiled at you, praised you, hugged you in your darkest moment, that it meant forever. But what Machiavelli understood, and what most people never do, is this: loyalty is a performance. And that performance is scripted by one thing: benefit, emotional benefit, financial benefit, social benefit, status, clout, comfort, control. It's not just lovers and friends either. Think about how quickly people's tone changes when you stop agreeing with them, when you draw a boundary, when you stop giving them access to the version of you that bent and broke just to keep the peace. Suddenly you're difficult. You're selfish. You're not who you used to be. But you know what you really became? Inconvenient. And in a world where people love convenience more than character, the inconvenient are always the first to go. This isn't about bitterness. This isn't about hating people. It's about waking up to the rules of the real world. Because when you treat loyalty like a guarantee, you suffer. You give. You overextend. You make sacrifices in the name of something that was never truly there. But when you start to see loyalty as rented, not gifted, you begin to protect your energy like it's gold. You stop over-explaining yourself to those who were only ever there for the version of you that served them. You stop feeling guilty for drawing a line that no one else was willing to draw. You start asking better questions. Not do they like me, but what do I represent to them? Not why did they leave, but what function did I stop fulfilling? Because here's the brutal truth. In the game of power, no one is your friend. Not in the way you hope. Not in the way you need. Not unless your presence strengthens their position. You want to test someone's loyalty? Become inconvenient. Set boundaries. Level up. Stop apologizing for existing. Take back your power. See who claps. Better yet, see who doesn't. That silence, that distance, that sudden shift in tone, that's your answer. You weren't betrayed. You just finally saw the fine print on the contract. And now that you know that loyalty isn't sacred, it's strategic, you'll stop giving it blindly. And what comes next? You start walking like a strategist, not a servant. The hidden economy of relationships. You've heard the words before. I'm always here for you. I've got your back. We're family. And maybe for a while you believe them. But let's strip the sentiment away. Let's get honest. What were they really saying? They weren't promising you unconditional love. They were saying, as long as you stay useful, I stay loyal. And that's the real economy underneath every relationship. Not love, not loyalty, but leverage. We live in a world where smiles are currency and affection is investment. People align with you not out of virtue, but out of utility. You offer them something, status, comfort, access, stability, and in return, they offer proximity. But the second that offering weakens, so does the illusion. You've seen it. That friend who drifted the moment you started saying no. The partner who suddenly became distant when you stopped chasing. The co-worker who cheered until your success eclipsed theirs. And what did you do? You blamed yourself. You thought you were the problem, that you changed, that maybe you became too much. But here's the truth no one wants to say out loud. You didn't change. You just stopped being convenient. Most relationships aren't rooted in love. They're rooted in function. You play a role. You serve a purpose. And when that purpose ends, so does a performance. It's not just personal, it's systemic. Relationships have value chains. Social value, emotional value, financial value. And like any chain, when one link breaks, the whole thing collapses. But we weren't taught to see it this way. We were taught to give, to forgive, to love unconditionally. We were taught that real friends never leave. Real partners never give up. Real loyalty never fades. That was a fairy tale. But Machiavelli never wrote fairy tales. He wrote about reality, cold, sharp, undeniable. He watched kings fall, alliances break, brothers turn on each other at the first hint of power imbalance. And through it all, he saw one brutal law emerge. Loyalty lasts only as long as benefit does. You want to know what's behind most betrayals? It's not jealousy. It's not hate. It's math. Cost versus benefit. And the moment the cost of staying outweighs the benefit of being near you, they go. Some will leave loud, dramatic, explosive. Others will leave in silence, like a ghost slipping out the back door of your life. No explanation. No apology. Just absence. And you'll sit there wondering, what happened? Here's what happened. The contract expired. Because most relationships are contracts. Unspoken, unwritten, but real. They're based on what you offer, not who you are. And when people feel that what you offer is no longer valuable to them, they don't renew the contract. They leave. So what do? You stop giving everything away in the name of connection. You stop bleeding out emotionally just to keep others comfortable. You stop thinking that your value lies in how much you can tolerate, sacrifice, or endure. You shift your mindset. You stop asking, why did they leave? And start asking, what did they lose by leaving? If the answer is nothing, you were never in a relationship. You were a resource. And resources get used. But the moment you see it for what it is, the moment you stop romanticizing what was always transactional, that's the moment you take your power back. Because now you start moving with clarity, not desperation. You stop trying to prove your worth. You start building value that doesn't need to beg for attention. You want to be kept around? Don't be lovable. Be valuable. Not emotionally manipulative, not transactional in spirit, but unignorable in impact. Because when your presence becomes a pillar, when your silence feels like the floor just fell out beneath them, when your absence shuts down their progress, that's when they stop viewing you as an option and start fearing you as a necessity. And that's how the hidden economy of relationships really works. So let others chase validation. Let them burn out trying to please the world. You build leverage. You move with purpose. You don't ask to be kept. You become impossible to lose. Weaponize kindness in childhood conditioning. You were taught to be kind, to forgive, to turn the other cheek, to give people the benefit of the doubt, even when they were clearly using you. And at first, it sounded noble, like strength, like virtue. But over time, you began to realize something dark, that your kindness wasn't earning you love. It was earning you entitlement, and that the more you gave, the more they took, without hesitation, without gratitude, without limit. That's not love. That's exploitation. Machiavelli understood this long before modern psychology ever caught up. He didn't call it kindness. He called it bait. Because in the game of power, predictable kindness isn't respected. It's leveraged. But the roots go deeper than adulthood. This didn't start in your job or in your last breakup. It started early, in the homes where children were taught that being good meant being silent, low maintenance, invisible. You learned to smile even when you were hurting, to say, "I'm fine," when you were falling apart, to shrink your needs to keep the peace, to apologize for simply existing too loudly. And you didn't do it because you were weak. You did it because it was safe. Because when love is conditional, you learn to perform. You learn to serve to be loved. But what happens when that training carries into adulthood? You become agreeable, pleasant, the easy one, the one who never complains, the one who forgives without being asked, the one who gives without boundaries, the one who's always there, even when no one's there for you. And then slowly, without even realizing it, you disappear. You become the therapist in your relationships, the peacekeeper in your family, the reliable one at work. But no one asks how you're doing because they've already decided you don't need support. You are the support. This is how kindness becomes a cage. And in the world Machiavelli studied, a world of kings' betrayal, shifting alliances, kindness without power was a liability. He wrote, "It is better to be feared than loved if you cannot be both." Not because fear is cruel, but because fear protects. Fear creates a boundary. Love by itself does not. This is not a call to become cruel. It's a call to become strategic. Because if your kindness doesn't have structure, if your empathy doesn't have limits, if your love doesn't have teeth, then you're not being kind. You're being consumed. Look around. The endlessly forgiving man who's now invisible to the people he serves. The woman who sacrificed everything for others and now can't recognize herself in the mirror. The friend who kept saying yes until no one even bothered to ask anymore. You're not alone. This is what happens when you're conditioned to believe that being liked is more important than being respected. But here's the shift. Kindness isn't weakness. It becomes weakness when it's predictable, when it's given indiscriminately, when it's used by others as a shortcut to avoid accountability. So how do you weaponize it? You give, but only when it supports your position. You forgive, but only when a lesson has been learned. You help, but never at the cost of your own core. You stop saying yes just to avoid conflict. You stop rescuing people from consequences. You stop watering relationships that only bloom when you're breaking yourself to do so. You draw the line, not with rage, but with presence. You speak less, but every word lands. You give less, but every gesture echoes power. You become someone who's kind, but unreadable, empathetic, but strategic, soft-spoken, but impossible to manipulate. Because in the game of power, the most dangerous kindness is the one that's not guaranteed. It's the kind that makes people ask, have I earned this? Not, how much more can I take? And when your kindness starts to demand respect, when your boundaries become unshakable, When people begin to fear the cost of your silence more than they enjoyed the comfort of your approval, that's when the game shifts. That's when kindness stops being a leash and starts becoming leverage. So keep your heart open, but sharpen your silence. Smile when you mean it, but never bleed on cue, because the world doesn't need more nice people. It needs more people who know when to stop being nice. Emotional control, the new power. You were taught to feel everything, to express it, to let it out when it hurts, to cry when you're overwhelmed, to speak when you're angry, to react when you're wronged. And at first glance, it seems healthy, human. But Machiavelli would shake his head, because in the real world, in the game of power, the one who feels too much, too loudly, loses. Not because emotion is bad, but because emotion is predictable. And what's predictable can be manipulated. This is why Machiavelli didn't fear the passionate. He feared the still, the ones who stayed quiet when most would explode, the ones who bled in silence and moved in shadows, the ones who never gave their enemies a reaction to study, only a result. You've seen this yourself. You've watched people lose their edge the moment they get emotional. The person who argues louder ends up looking weaker. The one who overreacts becomes a joke. The moment you reveal what triggers you, the world has a button they can press forever. Let's be clear, this isn't about turning off your humanity. This is about strategic self-control, about protecting your center of gravity so no one can knock you off balance with a word, a look, or a lie. Because when you react, they win. When you don't, they fear. You ever notice how the most powerful people in the room are the quietest? They don't flinch. They don't defend. They don't chase. They observe. That's not passivity. That's dominance in disguise. Picture this. You walk into a room. Someone mocks you, insults you, tries to provoke you. You don't blink. You don't argue. You simply look through them. That moment, your stillness, says more than 1,000 comebacks ever could. It says, I'm not here to react. I'm here to rule. Because here's the truth most people never understand. The one who controls their emotions controls the narrative. In a negotiation, it's not the smartest person who wins. It's the calmest, the one who can stay composed while everyone else cracks. In a confrontation, it's not the most aggressive who commands a room. It's the one who can take the blow without blinking. Because power isn't noise. It's nerve. You think you're strong because you speak your mind? Try sitting in silence while someone underestimates you. Try smiling through discomfort, not out of submission, but out of calculation. Try not reacting when everything in you is screaming to clap back. That's strength. That's war training. Because emotional expression, when misused, is vulnerability. And in the wrong hands, vulnerability becomes a weapon used against you. You tell them what angers you. They provoke it. You show them what makes you chase. They run. You admit silence unnerves you. They vanish. It's not cruelty. It's strategy. You're either the player or the puppet. So, how do you stop being the puppet? You begin where all power begins, with control over yourself. You train your nervous system like a soldier sharpens his blade. You learn to feel without flinching, notice without reacting, pause when your instincts scream to strike. Because between the trigger and the response, there is a space. And in that space is your advantage. That's the battlefield most people never even learn to fight on. They lose before they start, not because they're weak, but because they're loud, too visible, too easy to read, too easy to move. But you become a ghost in the system, a shadow they can't predict, a presence they can't pin down. You don't react, you redirect. You don't chase, you calculate. You don't speak to be heard. You let silence speak for you. That's the Machiavellian blueprint. Emotional mastery, not emotional suppression. Silence is strategy, not submission. Presence is pressure, not permission. Because once they can't read you, they can't control you. And once they can't control you, they start to fear you. Not because you're cruel, but because you're untouchable. And in the game of power, the one who can stand in the fire, unmoving, unreadable, and unbothered, is the one who commands a storm. Perception warfare. In the world of power, Perception is more dangerous than reality. You think control comes from truth? It doesn't. Control comes from the illusion of truth. And no one understood this better than Machiavelli. He didn't say, be honest. He said, be strategic. He knew people don't react to who you are. They react to who they think you are, which means if you can't control their loyalty, control their assumptions. Let them think you're soft when you're calculating. Let them believe you're distracted when you're watching everything. Let them think you're naive while you're setting traps. Because in this game, you don't need to be feared. You just need them to believe you might be dangerous. You don't need to be unpredictable. You just need to be unreadable. That's the art. That's the warfare of perception. Let's make it real. You walk into a room. You don't speak much. You don't overshare. You watch. You assess. Your silence makes them uneasy. They fill in the blanks with fear or respect, depending on their own insecurity. One assumes you're arrogant. The other assumes you're powerful. Here's the twist. You never confirmed either. You didn't manipulate them. You let them manipulate themselves. That's the move. Because the second you start explaining yourself, the second you try to correct their opinion of you, you lose control of the frame. And in this world, whoever controls a frame controls the outcome. Look around. The most powerful people in society, they don't talk much. They don't argue online. They don't clarify rumors. They let the mystery breathe. They let the world wonder. And that wonder turns into respect. Because power isn't about being understood. It's about being felt. Let me give you the 3 rules of perception warfare. The ones Machiavelli would weaponize in today's world. Rule 1. Calculated inconsistency. Never be too easy to read. Predictability invites underestimation. Let people taste different versions of you without ever knowing which one is real. Be warm one moment, distant the next. Be generous, then gone. Let your behavior make people question. Do I really know this person? That doubt? That unease? That's your shield. Rule 2, mirror strategy. People don't see you. They see their projection of you. So reflect it. Don't correct it. If they're insecure, your silence will feel like strength. If they're manipulative, your calm will feel like a threat. You don't need to explain who you are. Let them experience it through their own filter. That way, you're never predictable. You're never pinned. You become a mirror that distorts their own ego. Rule 3, tactical silence. Silence isn't absence. It's control. Every pause, every unanswered message, every moment you don't justify yourself becomes a battlefield where they're forced to fight their own thoughts. They start imagining what you meant, what you're planning, what you're hiding. And imagination is far more powerful than explanation. Say less. Let your presence stretch across the room without a single word. Let them chase the narrative you never gave them. Because the second they start guessing, they stop challenging. Even history proves this. Cao Cao, the Chinese warlord, mastered perception like no one else. He was never the strongest on the battlefield, but he didn't have to be. Sometimes he played the fool, sometimes the patriot, sometimes the villain. Each identity was a costume. Each role was a move. He let his enemies underestimate him until the blade was already at their throat. They called him paranoid. He called it preparation. And when his rivals were sleeping soundly in comfort, he was already building escape routes, positioning allies, constructing narrative armor no rumor could pierce. Why? Because the most dangerous man isn't the one who's loud. It's the one you can't read. The man who gives no tells. The one who says maybe when asked yes or no. The one whose smile never quite matches his words. The one who seems to disappear right when the crowd starts to cheer and reappears when the fire starts to burn. That's not luck. That's design. So what does this mean for you? It means you stop oversharing. You stop explaining your pain. You stop clarifying your intentions to people who aren't listening anyway. You start moving like smoke, seen but untouched, present but ungraspable. You don't need to be dominant. You just need to own the frame. Let them wonder if you're angry. Let them guess what you're planning. Let them project whatever story their fear creates. Because in the end, perception is leverage. And the most powerful thing you can be is the one thing they fear the most. Unknown. Loyalty as leverage, not love. Loyalty. It's one of the most romanticized words in the world. We talk about it like it's eternal, unconditional, sacred. Like once someone swears allegiance, it's written in blood. Like loyalty is some immortal force that transcends conflict, pressure, temptation. But if you've lived long enough, if you've ever been blindsided by someone you trusted, you already know the truth. Loyalty doesn't live in people's hearts. It lives in their interests. And when those interests shift, so does the loyalty. Machiavelli never sugarcoated this. He never called loyalty a virtue. He called it a variable. He said, and I quote, "Men forget the death of their father more easily than the loss of their inheritance." Cruel? Yes. True? Absolutely. Because what most people call betrayal is actually just calculation. They didn't change. They just did the math. And when you stop being useful, when your presence no longer served their goals, they subtracted you. And here's where most people get it wrong. They think loyalty ends because something went wrong. An argument, a disagreement, a misunderstanding. But more often than not, loyalty ends when something goes right. For you, when you level up, when you set a boundary, when you stop overgiving, when you realize your worth. Suddenly, the friend who once cheered for you is silent. The partner who once clung to you goes cold. The team that once said we rise together starts plotting your exit. You didn't break the bond. You just stopped being their ladder. And they weren't loyal to you. They were loyal to the version of you that made them feel important, in control, superior. The second you disrupted that dynamic, they walked. Or worse, they stayed and sabotaged. This is why Machiavelli warned rulers to never depend on affection, because affection fades. Gratitude evaporates. And promises? They're just words. Useful in the moment, disposable after. Instead, he said, don't build loyalty on love. Build it on leverage. Make it costly to walk away. Make it dangerous to betray. Make yourself so structurally essential that removing you feels like self-sabotage. You don't need people to love you. You need people to realize that losing you means losing everything they built with you. Let's bring it closer. You start a company. You and your co-founder grind day and night. Blood, sweat, no sleep, shared sacrifice. They call you brother. They say, we're in this together. Then you succeed. The money arrives. The titles change. Suddenly, they start rewriting the narrative. They restructure the equity. They cut you out of key decisions. They rebrand your vision and erase your name. And you sit there stunned, asking, how could they do this? Wrong question. The real question is, what system allowed them to do this? You didn't lose because they changed. You lost because you didn't build deterrence. There was no architecture, no friction, no cost, no consequence. You thought the relationship was loyalty. They saw it as leverage, and they rebalanced the scale. So, how do you prevent this? You build systems that make you irreplaceable. You become the one with the map, the key, the vision, the connection everyone else needs to move forward. You don't just contribute, you interlock. Your absence doesn't create disappointment. It creates collapse. That's not ego. That's engineering. Look at Steve Jobs. When Apple forced him out, they thought he was just a creative, just an idea guy. They didn't realize he was the cultural code behind the company. Without him, the machine stuttered. The vision blurred. The magic was gone. And so they begged him back. Why? Because his presence wasn't sentimental. It was structural. So ask yourself, if you disappeared tomorrow, would they adapt or would they scramble? If they adapt, you're replaceable. If they collapse, your infrastructure. And that's the goal. Not blind loyalty, but engineered dependence. You don't win by hoping people are good. You win by building systems that make it bad business to betray you. So stop asking, do they appreciate me? Start asking, have I made myself essential? Because when you're just nice, they leave when it's convenient. But when you're necessary, leaving you feels like burning their own empire. And the people who understand that, they don't just stay loyal. They invest deeper. Because now they're not protecting you. They're protecting themselves. And that is the only kind of loyalty that lasts. Solitude, from wound to weapon. They told you that being alone was a red flag. That if you didn't have a big group of friends, if you weren't constantly surrounded by people, something was wrong. You must be broken, bitter, rejected, unlovable. But what they never told you is that some of the most dangerous, most strategic, most powerful people in history stood alone first, not because they were arrogant, but because they were awake. They saw too much, felt too deeply, understood the game too clearly. And when you see the world without the filters, the lies, the costumes, you stop craving connection. You start craving clarity. Machiavelli knew this. He wrote that a prince must learn to be alone in his thinking, even when surrounded by others. Because the second you need a crowd to confirm your vision, you've already surrendered your throne. Let's make it personal. You've been in rooms where everyone was laughing, and yet you felt completely disconnected. You've had friendships that looked solid from the outside, but inside they were built on performance, on usefulness, on silence. And when you finally pulled away, when you stopped explaining yourself, when you sat in the quiet, the fear crept in. What if I end up alone? But here's the twist no one tells you. Solitude doesn't mean weakness. It means power. Because when you're truly alone, when the noise fades, when the applause dies down, when the phone stops buzzing, and it's just you, your thoughts, your past, your patterns, that's when you finally meet yourself. And in that silence, something terrifying happens, but also something sacred. You begin to see the masks, not theirs, yours. The roles you played to be accepted, the fake laughs, the swallowed pain, the invisible weight of being liked. You start to notice how much of your identity was built as a response to trauma, to rejection, to the hunger for love in places that only fed off you. And the deeper you sit with it, the more you realize you were never broken. You were just surrounded by people who needed you to stay small because your clarity threatened their confusion. Your discipline exposed their laziness. Your independence made their emotional control useless. So they left, or you did, and now here you are alone. But this time it's different. This time it's not loneliness, it's freedom. Because when you stop needing validation, you become impossible to manipulate. When you stop craving praise, you stop performing for people who never deserved your truth. When you stop filling every silence with company, you learn to fill it with power. This is how solitude becomes a fortress. It sharpens your instincts. It strengthens your emotional walls. It reintroduces you to the voice you buried under years of people-pleasing. You start walking differently, not because you're cold, but because you're calculated. You speak less. You observe more. You give nothing for free. Not your time, not your trust, not your access. You don't seek crowds. You let crowds seek you. And the irony, the more you embrace solitude, the more magnetic you become. Because people can sense it, that stillness, that distance, that complete lack of need. It confuses them, intimidates them, fascinates them, because they don't know how to control someone who doesn't need to be seen. And that's the final form of power, to exist without explanation, to be whole without an audience, to disappear and still be remembered, to walk alone and still be followed. Solitude is not isolation. It's dominance without noise. It's discipline without distraction. So let the others chase attention. Let them drown in clout. Let them confuse connection with control. You build in silence. You protect your peace like it's priceless. You turn your solitude into a sword so sharp that even your absence cuts deeper than their presence. You were taught to fear the quiet, but now you understand the quiet is where legends are born. Final truth, engineer dependence or be replaced. Let's stop pretending. You don't lose people because of misunderstandings. You don't lose people because of bad timing. You lose people because you stop being beneficial to their plans. They didn't wake up and choose betrayal. They woke up and did the math. And in their cost-benefit calculation, You became replaceable. This is a truth most people will never say out loud, because it's easier to romanticize relationships than it is to admit they run on logistics. We think people leave because something changed. No, they leave because the contract expired, the one you never knew you were in. So if you want to stop being betrayed, overlooked, discarded, replaced, don't beg, don't explain, engineer necessity, build leverage so precise, so deeply woven into the structure of their success, that losing you doesn't just hurt feelings, it collapses plans. That's not manipulation. That's infrastructure. Look at the irreplaceables in history. Steve Jobs. He wasn't just a visionary. He was the spirit of Apple. When they removed him, they didn't just lose a man. They lost the narrative, the mythology, the soul of the machine. And when machines started breaking, they brought him back, not because they loved him, but because they couldn't breathe without him. That's the goal, to build systems, relationships, alliances, where your absence is felt like a missing lung, where walking away is an emotional loss. It's a strategic catastrophe. Ask yourself, if you vanish tomorrow, would they recover? Would they reassign? Would they adapt? If the answer is yes, you're expendable. And expendable means disposable. But if your removal shakes the room, halts momentum, leaves project suspended, creates confusion, triggers panic, then you've done the work. You've gone beyond being liked. You become a pillar. That's what Machiavelli meant when he said, the promise given was a necessity of the past. The word broken is a necessity of the present. Because when things change, so does loyalty. And people don't feel guilty for abandoning what they never needed. They feel guilty when they know leaving you means destroying their own foundation. So stop building relationships based on emotion. Build them on interdependence. Design frameworks. Own processes. Control connections. Be the bridge between factions. Be the keeper of the information no one else can access. Be the one whose removal disconnects power from progress. This is how you stop being used. This is how you stop being replaced. This is how you win without begging. Because loyalty is not about honor. It's about cost. People don't betray what they fear losing. They betray what they think they can replace. So make yourself irreplaceable. Let others ask for loyalty. You build systems that make betrayal expensive. Let others get blindsided by backstabbing. You engineer alliances where disloyalty triggers mutually assured destruction. Let others say, but I thought we were close. You say, we had a contract. You broke it. You pay. Because you're not here to play the fool anymore. You're not here to hope people are good. You're here to make sure they can't afford not to be. Let's bring it all together. You were told that loyalty is sacred. That love is unconditional. That kindness is protection. But what they didn't teach you is that in the real world, everything has a price. Friendships, partnerships, allegiances, affection, they're all maintained by value, by structure, by what you provide. So stop asking if you're lovable. Start asking if you're foundational. You want power? Then stop chasing reassurance. Start building reliance. Because when people fear losing you, when your removal threatens their own stability, when staying close to you is the difference between growth and collapse, that's not friendship. That's checkmate. And the game was never about being liked. It was always about being the one they can't move without. So from this day forward, don't build hope. Build leverage. Don't demand loyalty. Design necessity. Don't ask to be respected. Become the structure they can't survive without. Because in the game of power, if you're not the asset they depend on, you're the weakness they'll exploit. And if they can leave you easily, they will. So the final move is yours. Make staying your ally the smartest decision they've ever made. And make betraying you the one they'll never stop paying for.